After my video of the Marantz preamplifier, I want to continue a series of videos just on the Audiolab 8000S. This is another piece of hi-fi equipment that I have from that era. I'm particularly interested in this channel about hi-fi electronics built between 1990 to the year 2000 approximately. I will sometimes cover product from before and after that era. And the channel is particularly about changing the capacitors to give these electronics again a fresh sound, and quite often also to fix some of the problems that they develop. But for the 8000S, I want to also record a couple of videos why I think this is an interesting piece of collector's item. I won't touch on what Audiolab's story is, too long for this video. Just very briefly, Audiolab launched fairly late compared to other hi-fi brands, even compared to UK hi-fi brands. Apparently the original amplifier, the first thing that they built, the 8000, came out in 1990. This, what we have in front of us, is an 8000S. The 8000S was built slightly later, or quite later actually. According to some sources on the internet, it was built between 2005 to 2008, differs from page to page. And then the 8000S will be followed by the 8200A that will be built from 2010 onwards. By that time, AAG Group in Asia had already acquired the brand together with other couple of hi-fi brands, and manufacturing had been moved to, I think to remember, Singapore, maybe it was Malaysia, but in any case in that region. This particular amplifier, the 8000S, is very much a slight revision of the original design, the 8000. So after 15 years, they were still mostly doing the same amplifier for another bunch of years. But they took out the phono input, which also justifies that the circuit board was rearranged now that the space for the turntable preamplification was gone. And in this couple of videos, I want to touch different aspects of the 8000S and why I think it is an interesting piece to own. In this particular video, I want to first guide you. What is the 8000? What makes it different to other amplifiers? Well, the looks. In this time, so you have to think that this particular unit comes from somewhere 2005 to 2008. That must be the time when I acquired it. Back then, Japanese manufacturers were using taller amplifiers that had to look big, although they were more empty than previous decades. But the looks was a lot, had a lot of meaning. The British brands will still make some of these very thin looking amplifiers. You can see it in Arkham, which is another brand that I own some component of, and in that era I also had a very similar looking set of amplifiers and preamplifiers. But what makes it also different is particularly this mode switch over here. As you see, this amplifier has no tone controls. No tone controls, also no direct input. It also has no AB speaker settings. And because it doesn't have a phono input, you also see no selector for MC or MM cartridges. Fairly basic there for that reason in the front. But it has a fully functional record selection and input selection, which share the text in the middle so that it looks more calm. So when the switch is towards the line, that is the auxiliary. Same for the record input. Now it's sending out to the auxiliary, to the output. It's sending the signal from the auxiliary. You can also choose another input contrary to the one that is going at that moment at the record. So a lot of flexibility here, although I should mention that you can hear a little bit the sound of another input going through the other inputs. So the separation of inputs is not good enough. So I wouldn't send some record signal while listening to another input, because probably there will be a little bit of contamination there. This is a motor-driven input selector, like the volume. That was an improvement over the original 8000, if I'm correct, which I don't recall having a remote control. And the remote control will change the position of the switch, but the switch is not changing the input directly. What it does is it controls relay. So when you are changing the input, not only do you hear a mechanical and confident sound of the selector input changing, you also hear the relays turning on and off to switch off the previous input and turn on the new input, which makes up for a very beefy feel, which I will cover in another chassis, in another chapter, goes along with the construction. It is constructed in the same way that it feels and sounds. With sound, I don't mean the sound signature of this amplifier, I mean the sound that it produces when you're changing selector or when you mute it. It has a very strong sound of the relays that activate and deactivate. Okay, the mode selector, and here starts what makes this amplifier very interesting. It has a pre-out position, although from my tests, it looks like the power amplification is still turned on, because the heat generation is the same in pre-position as in integrated. It has two pre-outs, which puts it more in line with what a proper preamplifier would be than the sort of functionality that you will find in an integrated amplifier. Actually, this integrated amplifier was not that expensive at the time. I think to remember it was around 500 to 600 euro, which will be similar in dollar. And for that kind of money, you would not find many integrated amplifiers that had pre-outs. But let alone, and as we will see in one of the later two positions, it can also be used as a power amplifier, so it also has an input. And it doesn't use those bridges that you could see quite often in Japanese amplifiers that were sending the signal to the pre-out and then with a bridge back into the power. No, when it is in the position integrated, the bridging is happening inside, not via those bridges on the RCAs. There is also a mute position, which obviously silence the amplifier. And then there are two more positions that are kind of similar. I quite often have to look at the manual to remember what is the subtle difference between pre-power and pre-power audiovisual. But basically what you have in these positions is that it has the pre-out working, like in the pre-position. It also has the power section working. So this could be combined with let's say another 8000S, one doing the input selection and then the other one doing the power. You could have maybe two sets of speakers, because there is no AB, so you could have the second amplifier doing a second set of speakers. Well, different combinations, and that is what makes this amplifier so interesting. It's tremendously flexible. Quite often with other amplifiers you have these options, but you fall short of something that you are trying to do. Not in this one, total freedom here. Not everything is great in this amplifier, I should say, particularly in this revision 4 unit that I have of the 8000S. The volume quickly is way too light. It's clear that this amplifier was built for heavier to drive speakers. So that also means that the headphone out is just way too loud. You cannot listen to headphones with 32, 40 ohm resistance. You need more heavy loaded headphones to be able to play with the volume. So what I did to sort of use this amplifier despite that very high output of the volume that hardly allows you to, I could normally not go beyond the 9 o'clock position. It was already too loud. So what I did is, using those positions of pre and power, what I was doing is I was bringing the signal out of the amplifier, Then I bought some resistors from eBay. You can also find cheaper models in Amazon. Resistors that have an RCA connector and they are built inside the RCA. And then I was bringing the signal back into the amplifier. So I had already reduced the signal, which was allowing me to play with the volume much more. I think I started with a 10 dB resistor, but moved up into a 15 dB. And I think that even with a 20 dB, it wouldn't be a wrong choice to really bring that volume down.